Top diplomats from the U.S. and Japan are working to build tighter defense ties. The growing partnership looks to counter Beijing. NTD interviews a Lithuanian member of parliament. We ask him about the Lithuanian president's apparent regret over its de facto Taiwanese embassy. The Chinese regime fines retail giant 7-Eleven over $20,000. The penalty comes after the company website listed Taiwan as a country. 2 Chinese vaccines equals an earning of over $10,000. And that's good to buy a decent house in some Chinese cities. That's what the Chinese Communist regime is trying to tell with its propaganda script. And officials in China's Xi'an announced the city had reached basically zero COVID cases. But citizens say there's another explanation for the claim. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Before we turn to today's daily news, we have a short announcement. We have our premiere at 9:30 p.m. from Monday to Saturday, not only on YouTube, but also on TV. NTD is available on many platforms, including cable TV, satellite, and over-the-air TV across the U.S., and it continues to grow. Please check out ntd.com/TV. Type in your zip code to find out all the ways you can watch our show. That's ntd.com/TV. And now we turn to today's daily news. America's top diplomat and defense chief are meeting with their Japanese counterparts. 2 major steps will lead to deeper defense ties between the 2 countries. This comes amid mounting aggression from China and increasing tensions over Taiwan.
Good evening and good morning.
Addressing the virtual meeting, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the allies will sign 2 major agreements. Together, they'll work to bolster U.S. Japan cooperation in defense.
We'll sign a new 5-year host nation support framework that will invest greater resources to deepen our military readiness and interoperability.
This framework will cover the continued basing of U.S. troops in Japan. There will also be further collaboration in the field of military research.
And we're launching a new research and development agreement that will make it easier for our scientists, for our engineers, and program managers to collaborate on emerging defense-related issues, from countering hypersonic threats to advancing space-based capabilities.
He cited North Korea's launch of a hypersonic missile earlier this week. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, still recovering from a COVID-19 infection, joined the meeting from home.
We know how strong that alliance is today. It remains the cornerstone of peace and prosperity in the region. And we're rightly proud that it's built upon a foundation of not just common interests, but also shared values.
Japanese Defense Minister Nobuo Kishi said the U.S.-Japan alliance is crucial at the moment in the face of provocative actions by the Chinese regime.
We shared concerns that China's efforts to undermine the rule-based order raised various challenges for the region and the international community. Japan and the United States have reaffirmed the resolve to work together to deter and, if necessary, respond to destabilizing activities in the region.
Kishi reiterated the importance of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Prior to the Thursday meeting, Japan signed a security pact with Australia. The move was seen as a response to China's increasing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region.
A number of Chinese state-owned media outlets are reporting on Lithuania's president's apparent regret. It's over a decision related to a de facto Taiwanese embassy in the country. NTD's David Zhang interviewed a Lithuanian member of parliament to find out more about the situation.
China's state-owned media is welcoming remarks by Lithuania's president, where he says opening a de facto Taiwanese embassy in Lithuania under Taiwan's own name was a mistake. But those outlets haven't given all the details. A Lithuanian member of parliament and head of the Parliamentary Group for Relations with Taiwan recently explained to NTD why the president made the remark.
Our president, he's very pro for relationship with Taiwan. And the question is about the cooperation between the presidency office and the government's office and the office of Minister of Foreign Affairs. It's a question only related to some inside question and coordination. It's got nothing to do on our stand with Taiwan. We have to understand.
Maldakis says that he's sorry if the president's remarks sent a wrong message to Taiwan. Relations between Lithuania and China deteriorated in recent months. That's after the Baltic state allowed Taiwan to open a de facto embassy there. And recently, Lithuania and Taiwan started building closer economic cooperation. Taiwanese officials said Wednesday that they plan to create a $200 million fund to invest in Lithuanian industries and boost bilateral trade. The announcement comes after Beijing started blocking some Lithuanian exports from entering China. Maldakis says it's important for the cooperation with Taiwan to be successful.
And from our side, the biggest we can do in this sense is to show that cooperation between Lithuania and Taiwan will be a success. If it is a success story, it also sends the signal to other countries, and very strong signal. Being not dependent on China and
Beijing's economic pressure includes blocking 20,000 bottles of Lithuanian rum from crossing into China. But when Taiwan learned of the situation, the island bought up all the liquor. Now those goods are scheduled to reach the Taiwanese market by the end of this month. Maldakis says Lithuania is thankful for the support from the Taiwanese people and government. He called it important for democracies to support each other.
As Beijing puts more pressure on Lithuania, the Baltic state is fighting back. Recently, Lithuania ordered its state-owned railroads not to sign contract with Chinese companies. At the same time, U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai told the Lithuanian foreign minister that the nation has Washington's support. And France is also urging the European Union to push back against China in light of conflicts involving Lithuania. Beijing has fined 7-Eleven over $20,000. That's because the convenience store chain listed Taiwan as a country on its website. Communist China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has been threatening to take it over by force. That's despite the island having its own democratically elected leaders and constitution. 7-Eleven started as a convenience store chain in the U.S. It's now owned by a Japanese company. Beijing was also upset with how 7-Eleven referred to a group of disputed islands between China and Japan. Japan calls the islands the Senkakus, while Beijing calls them the Diaoyu. 7-Eleven used the Japanese name on its website. The owner of 7-Eleven says it sincerely accepts Beijing's fine and that it will do its best to prevent a recurrence. Made in China products camouflaged in order to enter the U.S. military. That done by two American companies. NTD's Iris Tao brings us details about the latest announcement by the Justice Department.
Two American companies now have to pay the government $900,000. This as a punishment for trying to trick the U.S. military about where their products were actually made. The Department of Justice on Thursday reveals that Sono International in Connecticut and Arc Capital Equipment in New York have agreed to pay the government for violating the False Claims Act. They supplied the Army and the Air Force with hundreds of shipping containers, allegedly hiding the fact that they were made in China or with Chinese steel. The DOJ's announcement comes as President Biden re-emphasizes supply chain security on the same day.
Let's make Let's make what we're selling in America made in America. So we're not at risk of foreign supply chains.
According to court documents obtained by NTD, Sono and Arc are accused of intentionally changing the identifying metal plates on 100 shipping containers made in China so that they appear to have been made in South Korea. The DOD's Buy American regulations require agencies to purchase American-made materials or ones made in specified allied countries, such as South Korea. U.S. Attorney Jennifer Williams says in the statement that Americans have the right to know that their tax dollars are being spent to support American jobs and American policies. She adds that those providing for our warfighters will be punished if they don't follow clear rules. The case surfaces amid ongoing tensions between China and the U.S. The White House has warned against threats posed by Chinese products in critical supply chains. Iris Tao, NTD News.
The U.S. Justice Department says a Chinese national pleaded guilty on Thursday in a federal court. He was charged with conspiring to steal trade secrets from agricultural company Monsanto to benefit the Chinese regime. Xi'an Haitao worked for Monsanto and a subsidiary from 2008 to 2017. He pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit economic espionage. He is scheduled to be sentenced on April 7th. Xi'an faces a maximum of 15 years in prison. In June 2017, Xi'an was waiting to board a flight to China when federal officials found him carrying intellectual property developed by Monsanto. Xi'an was allowed to fly to China, and he worked for China's Institute of Soil Science. But he was arrested when he returned to the U.S. The Chinese regime is taking a new approach towards its pandemic-related propaganda campaign. A new narrative has flooded Chinese social media platforms in recent days. It promotes a highly exaggerated claim that 2 doses of Chinese-made vaccines equals the cost of an average house in a mid-level Chinese city. A number of pro-Beijing accounts have been repeating the idea, hinting that Chinese people should be grateful to the regime for offering such an expensive vaccine for free. The scripts vary slightly, but with one main point in common. It reads, "Do you know? The vaccines you have taken cost enough to buy a house in a third-tier city. Our country is so great and so kind to us." In one propaganda video, a woman makes an even more inflated claim. She says that outside China, 2 doses of Chinese-made vaccines cost a whopping $120,000. She goes on to say that in some nations, like Australia, Chinese-made jabs are priced even higher, totaling an immense $450,000. The video attempts to suggest the prices reflect Chinese-made vaccines' popularity overseas. But looking at outside source data, these dollar amounts are highly puffed up. Housing costs can vary widely in China. Beijing is known for its skyrocketing real estate costs. But in mid-level or so-called third-tier cities, housing prices range from around $20,000 to $50,000. By comparison, 1 dose of China's Sinovac Biotech COVID-19 vaccine costs just under $30, while 2 doses will run around $60. Internet users are calling out the apparent discrepancy on social media. Below a number of Chinese propaganda videos posted to Twitter, comments are flowing in. One of them calls the claim embarrassing. Others suggest the Chinese Communist regime's propaganda is becoming too easy to debunk and question how anyone could believe its claims. Beijing is pushing forward its zero-COVID goal, no matter the cost. But now, amid one of the country's strictest lockdowns to date, people in Xi'an city are realizing that they are actually the cost the regime's propaganda is referring to. Here's what some of them have to say.
Central China's Xi'an city is now all but paralyzed by the communist regime's pandemic control orders. NTD interviewed some residents there to find out more about the situation. One of them, Mr. Zhao, gave his take on what's happening.
The lockdown has been going on for over 10 days. We are not allowed to go out nor to go downstairs. Close your eyes and imagine a city of over 10 million people, but you can barely see any people or cars on the street. Only staff and vehicles are patrolling around. All households have their doors shut. Shops are closed. Imagine that. It's not even like this in wartime.
Another resident shared a video focused on how many in the city are stuck with nowhere to go. Others comment on social media about more difficulties. And hashtags like nowhere to buy vegetables, starved to death, and nothing left have started popping up on trending topics lists. In another clip, a man is seen visibly upset, describing being hungry. Since residents are banned from leaving home, officials have pledged to deliver groceries door to door. But reports have come in saying the deliveries are small and infrequent. On the other hand, food supplies rarely seem to run short for Communist Party officials and those tied to them. One such woman was seen showing off a delivery of free food, including various vegetables, meat, fish, and eggs. On the healthcare front, the situation is also reportedly worsening. Medical care has become limited amid strict hospital policies driven by Xi'an's lockdown. Resident Mr. Lin has high blood pressure and relies on daily medication. He told NTD that now it's hard to get that medication refilled because the pandemic control staff won't let him go out to get it.
I argued with them for over 40 minutes. They finally let me go outside the community, but there's no bus to take. I'm nearly 80 with high blood pressure. I finally walked to the hospital and my blood pressure rose over 160, showing symptoms of a stroke. I suffer a lot.
Another Xi'an resident reportedly suffered a sudden heart attack. He later lost his life amid delays in hospital care. Reports say he called emergency services multiple times when his symptoms first surfaced, but he wasn't able to reach help. By the time his call went through, emergency personnel refused to take him to the hospital because he didn't have an up-to-date negative virus test result. He went on to get rejected by 3 total hospitals until he lost his life in bed at the 4th hospital. The medical staff member seen in this clip asked the person shooting the video to stop filming, likely to keep details about the situation from getting out.
After 2 weeks of strict lockdowns, Xi'an announced on Wednesday that community virus cases in the city had reached basically zero and that the outbreak had been effectively controlled. This means that all new cases were detected in individuals undergoing quarantine and in areas under lockdown. Authorities say this is a big success, but not everyone seems to agree. A retired college instructor in China tells NTD that the harm done by the zero cases policy is greater than the harm done by the outbreak itself. She also says that the zero cases policy is a political task and that CCP officials are falsifying figures to make political requirements. To protect her identity, we only use her last name.
They are just trying to complete political tasks. The reports on zero cases are all fake. This is because it has something to do with each individual's position. If the pandemic spreads, the official will be dismissed. So he covers it up and doesn't report it, or he reports less than it really is. If he reports the true situation, they will punish him. They are not there to solve the problem.
Leo says this is a very common phenomenon in communist countries. Some netizens are pointing out that a week ago, the CCP secretary of the province set a goal of achieving zero cases by January 4th. And then on January 5th, authorities announced that the city had reached the goal. One netizen commented, the virus is really loyal to the party. The party says that it will not spread, then it stops spreading. They should recruit Comrade Virus into the party. The joke has gone viral on social media. It makes fun of the terms basically zero and dynamically zero. The joke goes like this. Basically zero means you throw the garbage from your house to your neighbor's house, and there will be basically zero garbage in your house. And dynamically zero means the next day the neighbor throws all the garbage back to your house, and the day after you throw all the garbage back to your neighbor's house once again. Then both you and your neighbor will have dynamically zero garbage. This joke refers to how authorities are moving a lot of people to other places for quarantine. Beijing is closely monitoring the unrest in Kazakhstan. On Friday, CCP leader Xi Jinping said that he strongly opposes any external forces' attempt to instigate revolutions in Kazakhstan and harm China's relations with the country. Violent protests erupted across Kazakhstan over rising fuel prices and partially over a lack of real democracy. In response, the president of Kazakhstan declared a state of emergency in parts of the country on Wednesday. Kazakhstan's stability is critical to China. This is because the country is key to Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. It was also where Xi Jinping first announced the project in 2013. From 2005 to 2020, China's total investment in Kazakhstan reached nearly $20 billion. Kazakhstan is also an important source of gas for China. In 2017, the two countries made an agreement. Kazakhstan would export 170 billion cubic feet of natural gas to China each year. China is also Kazakhstan's second largest trading partner. Total trade between the two countries reached over $22 billion in 2021. The protests and riots may threaten Chinese firms and investments in Kazakhstan. Chinese state media Global Times has even stepped in to ease those concerns. But it still admitted that the situation in Kazakhstan will inevitably have some impact on the delivery of oil and gas. Now, speaking of China's business practices, there seems to be a growing trend of companies looking for options when it comes to where they get their goods. Many are looking for ways to move that production out of China to somewhere closer. NTD's Paul Graney sits down with two industry experts to find out more.
So with business in China, given restrictions and COVID policies becoming ever more difficult, it seems, we're delighted to be joined by American law firm Harris Bricken, We have Fred Rockerford, chair of the international team, who spent more than a decade doing law practice in Hong Kong and mainland China. Also, Adrian Cisneros, head of Harris Bracken's Mexico office. Mr. Cisneros also became the first Mexican attorney to earn a doctor's degree in law in China. Guys, great to see you. I believe you have a webinar coming up that there's been a lot of interest on. How companies can move production from China to Mexico. Fred, maybe we can start with you. You can let me know, how are the inquiries on this? Are we seeing more people inquiring about this? And if so, what particular industries?
Well, we are definitely seeing, and first of all, Paul, thank you for the opportunity once again to talk to you about China-related topics, and a pleasure to be here with Adrian. But to answer your question, yes, we are seeing increasing interest in relocating from China to other manufacturing destinations, and more broadly in relocation. This is not something new, I should say. We've been seeing this trend for several years now, although things have certainly picked up over the course of the pandemic. And it is something that we're seeing across industries. Obviously, the companies that are most interested in looking for alternatives are those who manufacture in China. But within that set of companies, we are seeing interest from different sectors.
What are the main reasons people are giving, Fred?
Well, the rationales for these decisions has been evolving, although there are some common threads. If you go back, let's say 5-6 years, the concerns were mainly related to rising costs in China, and also we were beginning to see the first companies who had, if you want, had been caught up in the bandwagon and thought, okay, China is the place where manufacturing is taking place. But over time, they reassessed that, and they found that for their particular business model, being in China was not necessary, and in fact, in some cases, presented difficulties that they sought to avoid by going elsewhere. As the trade war started and intensified, then the focus shifted to the impact of the tariffs. For a lot of companies, the tariffs were too much of a burden, and they wanted to look for alternatives so that their products wouldn't be made in China, and as such wouldn't be subject to tariffs and other trade measures that have been put in place. And then with the pandemic, we've started seeing yet another shift where now companies are concerned with supply chain issues. They're concerned with shipping. They're looking at the bigger picture. They're concerned about their long-term resiliency if they rely on China for their products, both from a geopolitical standpoint and also from a practical one, given the distance between the two countries.
Adrian, Fred, really appreciate it. Thank you both. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you go, we have a short announcement. As you may already know, YouTube has demonetized us for about a year. That means our ability to run ads or earn money on YouTube has been taken away. So if you like our coverage, you can donate to show your support. Here's how. In the description box down below is a link that will take you through the entire process. Thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to providing you with more insights into China in the year ahead. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.